They scrubbed her name from the census. They burned her birth certificate. For 22 years, Audrey Penelope was a ghost in her own home, a secret buried beneath the floorboards of the Blackwood estate. Alpha Richard believed that if he kept her hidden long enough, the world would forget the crime he committed to get his crown. But he forgot one thing: nature doesn't make mistakes. And when King Gabriel Sterling walked into that ballroom, he didn't need a document to tell him what was missing. He just needed to follow the scent of rosemary and rain to the locked cellar door. This is the story of the girl who wasn't supposed to exist. The heat in the industrial kitchens of the Blackwood estate was suffocating, clinging to Audrey's skin like a second, unwanted layer. It smelled of roasted venison, red wine reduction, and the sharp, chemical tang of industrial degreaser. For Audrey Penelope, this was the only world she knew. At 22, Audrey was small for a werewolf, if you could even call her that. She hadn't shifted. She hadn't felt the snap of bone or the rush of adrenaline that every other teenager in the pack experienced at 16. To the rest of the Silver Moon pack, she was a dormant, a genetic dead end, a shameful secret kept on the payroll only out of the supposed charity of Alpha Richard Blackwood. "Audrey, move it. The salad plates need to be staged in 5 minutes," barked Mrs. Higgins, the head cook. She wasn't cruel, just tired. Her graying hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her apron was stained with berry juice. "Yes, Mrs. Higgins," Audrey murmured, wiping her hands on a rag. She kept her head down. That was the first rule of survival in the Blackwood house. Don't be seen, don't be heard, just be useful. Tonight was different, though. The air in the estate was vibrating with a tension that made the hair on Audrey's arms stand up. The king was coming. Gabriel Sterling, the Alpha King, the man who ruled over the North American alliance of packs. He wasn't just a figurehead. He was a titan of industry and a warrior of legend. He was visiting the territory to conduct the decennial census and, rumor had it, to scout for a mate, as the council was pressuring him to secure his bloodline. Audrey reached for a stack of porcelain plates, her fingers trembling slightly. She knew she wouldn't see him. She was never allowed upstairs during high-profile visits. The kitchen swing doors burst open. The chatter of the sous chefs died instantly. Alpha Richard Blackwood strode in. He was a handsome man in his late 40s, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Audrey would earn in a lifetime. But his eyes were cold sharks swimming in a blue ocean. He didn't look at the staff. He looked straight at Audrey. "Out," Richard commanded the staff. "Everyone out. Now." Mrs. Higgins hesitated, looking at Audrey. But the Alpha's growl, low and vibrating in his chest, sent them scurrying into the pantry or out the back exit. Audrey stood alone by the stainless steel prep table. She gripped the edge of it until her knuckles turned white. "Alpha," she whispered. Richard closed the distance between them. He smelled of expensive cologne and the underlying musk of a predator. "You know the protocol, Audrey. I can stay in the dish pit, sir. I won't make a sound. The vents are loud, no one will hear me." "No," Richard cut her off, his voice smooth and dangerous. "King Gabriel has senses sharper than any wolf I've ever met. He would smell a dormant runt stinking up his dinner. You are an embarrassment to this pack, Audrey. A reminder of weak blood." He grabbed her upper arm. His grip was bruising. He dragged her not toward the staff quarters, but toward the heavy oak door at the back of the kitchen, the root cellar. Audrey's heart hammered against her ribs. "Please, Alpha. It's freezing down there. The rats. Then perhaps the cold will teach you gratitude for the roof I keep over your head," Richard sneered. He opened the door, revealing a descending darkness that smelled of wet earth and rot. "You stay down there until the king's motorcade leaves the county line tomorrow morning. If I hear a single scratch at this door, you won't just be hidden, Audrey. You'll be erased." He shoved her. Audrey stumbled down the first 3 wooden steps, barely catching the railing to stop herself from falling into the blackness. The heavy door slammed shut above her. Click. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed like a gunshot. Audrey sat on the cold stairs, wrapping her thin cardigan around herself. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She was used to the cruelty. She was used to the dark. But tonight felt different. Deep in her chest, a strange ache began to pulse, a longing she couldn't explain, as if a compass needle inside her soul had suddenly found north. Upstairs, the heavy bass of the orchestra began to play. King Gabriel Sterling was bored. To the 300 guests in the Blackwood ballroom, he looked engaged. He nodded politely as the mayor's wife discussed zoning laws. He sipped his champagne with practiced elegance. He stood 6'4", his shoulders broad enough to block out the light from the chandeliers, with dark hair and eyes the color of molten gold. He radiated power, a gravitational pull that made weaker wolves instinctively bare their necks when he walked by. But internally, Gabriel was checking his watch. "Impressive turnout, Your Majesty." His beta, Thomas, murmured, stepping up beside him. Thomas was holding a tablet, cross-referencing the guest list. "It's theatrical, Thomas," Gabriel replied, his voice a low baritone that didn't carry beyond them. "Richard Blackwood runs his pack like a reality TV show. Too much gloss, not enough substance." Gabriel scanned the room. Women in designer gowns paraded past him, tossing their hair and releasing potent waves of pheromones meant to entice him. It was exhausting. He wasn't looking for a trophy. He was looking for a partner, someone real. "Have we completed the audit?" Gabriel asked, turning his back on the dance floor. "Mostly," Thomas said, tapping the screen. "Financials look creative, but the census is the strange part." Gabriel frowned. "Strange how?" "The numbers don't add up. Based on the birth records from 20 years ago versus the current active pack members, there's a discrepancy. One female unaccounted for, a Audrey Penelope, daughter of the former Beta, who died in that car accident with his wife." Gabriel took the tablet. "Is she listed as deceased?" "No, just gone. No death certificate, no transfer papers to another pack. It's like she just stopped existing in the paperwork around age 10. Gabriel's wolf, the primal spirit that lived inside him, lifted its head. "Something is wrong. Ask Blackwood," Gabriel ordered. Just then, Alpha Richard approached, a beaming young woman on his arm. She was stunning, blonde, and wearing a red dress that left little to the imagination. "Your Majesty," Richard bowed, his smile tight. "May I present my daughter Jessica? She has been top of her class at the academy." Jessica giggled, a sound that grated on Gabriel's nerves. "It's an honor, King Gabriel." She stepped too close, her perfume cloying and synthetic. "Charmed," Gabriel said flatly. "Richard, my beta found an irregularity in your census." Richard's smile didn't falter, but Gabriel saw the microscopic twitch in his jaw. The scent of sour anxiety spiked in the air. "Paperwork is always a hassle, Your Majesty. I'm sure it's a clerical error." "Audrey Penelope," Gabriel said the name clearly. Jessica gasped. It was small, but it was there. She looked at her father with wide, panicked eyes. "Ah," Richard waved a hand dismissively. "Sad story. A tragedy. The girl, she was a dormant. Mentally unstable. She ran away years ago. We believe she perished in the wilderness. We didn't file the death certificate to spare the pack the grief." "Lee," Gabriel could taste the lie on his tongue. It tasted like ash. His wolf growled, a low rumble that made the champagne glasses on the nearby table vibrate. "Is that so?" Gabriel asked. Suddenly, a waiter passing with a tray of hors d'oeuvres tripped or perhaps was nudged. A glass of red wine went flying, splashing across the front of Gabriel's pristine white shirt. The ballroom went silent. "Oh my God," Jessica shrieked. "You clumsy idiot." "It is fine," Gabriel said, raising a hand to stop Richard from striking the waiter. The wine was soaking into his skin, but beneath the smell of expensive alcohol, Gabriel caught a whiff of something else. It was faint. It was coming from the floorboards, or the vents. It smelled like rain on hot asphalt. Like rosemary bushes in the sun, it smelled like home. "I need to clean up," Gabriel announced. "Where is the nearest washroom?" "I'll have a suit brought to the guest suite upstairs," Richard began. "No," Gabriel said, his eyes darkening. The scent was pulling him. It wasn't pulling him upstairs. It was pulling him toward the service corridor. "I'll use the facilities near the kitchen. I prefer to see how a pack operates behind the scenes anyway." Richard's face drained of color. "Your Majesty, the kitchens are a mess. It's not suitable for— Are you forbidding your king, Alpha Blackwood?" Gabriel's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of an executioner's blade. Richard swallowed hard. "Of course not. Right this way." Gabriel walked with purpose, ignoring the guests. He moved through the swing doors into the kitchen. The heat hit him, along with the chaotic smells of cooking. The staff froze, staring at the stained king, but Gabriel ignored them. He walked past the ovens, past the prep stations. He stopped in the center of the room. The scent was stronger here. It was distressed. It was spiked with fear and cold. Rosemary, rain, distress. "Mate," his wolf whispered. Gabriel's heart stopped, then restarted with the force of a sledgehammer. He spun around, scanning the room. No one here matched the scent. What is behind that door? Gabriel pointed to the heavy oak door at the back, secured with a heavy iron deadbolt. Richard rushed forward, sweat beading on his forehead. That? It's just the old root cellar. Rats, mold. We keep it locked for health and safety. Gabriel walked to the door. He placed his hand on the wood. Through the thick timber, he could hear a heartbeat. It was fast, terrified. Open it, Gabriel commanded. I don't have the key on me, Richard stammered. The janitor took it home. Really, Your Majesty, this is... She is in there, Gabriel said. He didn't ask. He stated it. Who? My mate. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Richard looked like he was about to vomit. I said. Gabriel turned to Richard, his eyes glowing a brilliant, terrifying gold. Open. This door. I can't, Richard whispered, defeated. Fine. Gabriel grabbed the iron handle. He didn't use a key. He channeled his alpha strength into his shoulder and arm. With a roar that shook the pots hanging from the ceiling, he ripped the deadbolt purely out of the frame. Wood splintered and flew across the room. Gabriel wrenched the door open. Darkness poured out. And there, sitting on the bottom step, looking up with wide, terrified hazel eyes, was a girl in a dirty cardigan. She looked frail, malnourished, and covered in dust. But to Gabriel, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Audrey? He breathed. Audrey looked up at the towering man silhouetted in the light. She didn't know who he was, but her soul did. The ache in her chest snapped into a perfect, burning connection. You found me, she whispered. Gabriel fell to his knees, ignoring the dirt, and reached a hand out to her. I will always find you. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than the iron door Gabriel had just ripped from its hinges. For a long moment, nobody moved. The steam from a boiling pot of stock curled lazily toward the ceiling, the only thing in the room daring to exist. Gabriel remained on his knees. It was a position no one had ever seen the Alpha King in subservient, grounded, lowered, but he didn't look weak. He looked like a deity worshipping at a forgotten altar. His hand was still extended, hovering in the damp, cold air of the cellar entrance. Palm open, Audrey stared at that hand. It was large, calloused, and steady. A gold signet ring gleamed on his finger, catching the harsh fluorescent light of the kitchen. She pressed her back against the rough brickwork of the cellar wall. Her mind was a fractured kaleidoscope of terror. This is a test, she thought. Alpha Richard is testing me. If I take his hand, I'll be punished. If I come out before morning, I'll be erased. Come out, Gabriel said. His voice wasn't the thunderous command he had used on Richard. It was a low rumble, vibrating with a desperate sort of tenderness. It's safe. Audrey shook her head, her chin tucking into her chest. I can't, she rasped. Her voice was thin, unused. The Alpha, he said, mourning. He said, a low snarl ripped through the room. It didn't come from a wolf. It came from Gabriel's chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury directed at the man standing behind him. Richard flinched violently. He took a step back, bumping into a prep table and sending a tray of silverware clattering to the floor. The noise was deafening, causing Audrey to gasp and cover her ears, curling into a tighter ball. Gabriel's head snapped up. His eyes, usually a warm molten gold, were bleeding into a feral red. He looked at Richard, and for a second, every member of the kitchen staff forgot how to breathe. If you make another sound, Gabriel whispered, the threat distinct and terrifyingly calm, I will tear your throat out in front of your own staff. He turned back to Audrey, his expression instantly softening, though the agony in his eyes remained. He realized his size was frightening her. He shifted, lowering himself further until he was sitting on the dirty kitchen tiles, putting himself at eye level with her position on the stairs. I am not Alpha Blackwood, Gabriel said softly. My name is Gabriel. Do you know what a mate is, Audrey? Audrey blinked. Mate. The word belonged to fairy tales. It belonged to the beautiful people upstairs in silk dresses, not to the girl who scrubbed the pots those people ate from. It's a story, she whispered. It is not a story, Gabriel said. It is gravity. It is the reason I can smell the rosemary on your skin even though you are covered in dust. It is the reason my heart is currently beating in time with yours. He inched his hand closer, careful not to touch her yet. You are my mate, Audrey. And by the laws of the council and the old magic, that makes you a queen. No one gives you orders anymore. Not even me. Especially not him. Audrey looked at Richard. Thelfa was pale, sweating profusely, his arrogance stripped away to reveal the cowardice beneath. He gave a tiny, jerky nod, terrified of contradicting the king. Audrey's trembling hand lifted. She reached out, her fingers stained with soot and earth. As soon as her skin brushed Gabriel's palm, a jolt of electricity, pure, hot, and revitalizing, arced between them. She gasped, the pain in her joints, the ache of hunger in her belly. The cold had all receded, pushed back by a wave of warmth that rushed up her arm and settled in her chest. Gabriel closed his fingers around hers. He didn't pull. He anchored. "I've got you," he promised. With a strength she didn't know she had, drawn from his touch, Audrey stood up. Her legs were wobbly, deadened by the cold stone steps. She stumbled as she cleared the threshold. Gabriel didn't hesitate. He rose fluidly and scooped her up into his arms. She weighed nothing. That realization nearly broke him. He could feel her ribs through the thin, moth-eaten wool of her cardigan. She was light as a feather, brittle as a dried leaf. "Put me down," she panicked weakly, pushing against his chest. "I'm dirty. Your suit, the wine, the mud. I don't care about the suit," Gabriel said, pulling her tighter against his chest, tucking her head under his chin to shield her from the staring eyes of the staff. "I would burn 1,000 suits to hold you for a minute." He turned to face the room. Mrs. Higgins, the head cook, was weeping silently into her apron. The sous chefs were bowing their heads, baring their necks in submission to the mate bond they could all sense radiating from the king. "Thomas," Gabriel barked, not looking back. His beta materialized from the hallway, phone in hand. Thomas took one look at the bundle in Gabriel's arms and his professional mask cracked. Horror filled his eyes. "Get the car," Gabriel ordered. "Now." "Yes, Alpha. And Thomas?" Gabriel's voice dropped to a glacial temperature. "Call the enforcers. Seal the estate. No one leaves. No one enters. If Richard Blackwood attempts to step foot off this property, execute him." Richard let out a strangled cry. "Your Majesty, you can't, this is a misunderstanding. She's sick. I was quarantining her for the safety of the pack." Gabriel didn't acknowledge him. He didn't even look at him. To acknowledge him would be to give him value. Instead, Gabriel walked out of the kitchen, carrying Audrey through the service corridors. He walked past the grand ballroom doors. The music was still playing a waltz. Laughter filtered through the wood. We can't go through the lobby," Audrey whispered into his shirt. "People will see." "Let them see," Gabriel said, his jaw set. "Let them see exactly what their alpha has been hiding." But he didn't take her through the ballroom. He wouldn't expose her vulnerability to those vultures yet. He kicked open the side exit, stepping out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflecting the moon. A black limousine idled at the curb, its engine purring. Thomas had the door open before Gabriel even reached it. Gabriel slid into the back seat, settling Audrey on the plush leather beside him. He didn't let go of her hand. "Drive," he told the driver. "Get us to the consulate." As the car pulled away, Audrey looked out the tinted window. She saw the silhouette of the Blackwood estate, the only home she had ever known, the prison that had consumed her childhood fading into the darkness. She wasn't free yet. She could feel the shadow of the house reaching for her. But for the first time in 22 years, the door wasn't locked. The journey to the consulate, a neutral territory hotel used for diplomatic pack business, took 40 minutes. For 39 of them, Audrey didn't speak. She sat on the edge of the leather seat, her body rigid. The luxury of the limousine felt hostile. The air conditioning was too perfect, the seats too soft, the silence too thick. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. She waited for Gabriel to laugh, to tell her this was a cruel prank, to drive her into the woods and leave her there as Richard had threatened. But Gabriel just watched her. He had taken off his ruined tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, smelling of cedarwood, rain, and him. It was a shield. He didn't crowd her. He sat on the opposite bench, his long legs stretched out, his hands resting on his knees, but his eyes never left her face. He was memorizing her. He was cataloging every smudge of dirt, every split end in her hair, every shadow under her eyes. "You're staring," Audrey whispered, her voice cracking. Gabriel blinked, as if waking from a trance. "I apologize. I have been looking for you for a very long time, Audrey. I am having trouble believing you are real." "I'm nobody," she murmured, looking at her hands. "I'm a dormant. I can't shift. I have no wolf. I'm just a mistake in the bloodline." "Who told you that?" Gabriel asked sharply. "Everyone. Alpha Richard. My parents. Before they died, Gabriel's eyes narrowed. Your parents told you that you were a mistake? Audrey hesitated. The memory was foggy, buried under years of trauma. I think so. Richard said they were ashamed of me. That's why they left me behind when they went on that trip, the trip where they crashed. Audrey, Gabriel leaned forward, his voice intense. Dormant wolves are rare, yes. But they are not mistakes, and they are certainly not treated like this. He gestured to her thin frame, the dirt, the fear radiating off her. This isn't about biology. This is cruelty. The car slowed to a halt. We are here, Thomas said from the front seat. The consulate was a towering structure of glass and steel. As the car doors opened, a team was already waiting. Not soldiers, but medical staff. Thomas had called ahead. No wheelchair, Gabriel commanded as a porter rolled one forward. She walks if she wants to walk. If she cannot, I carry her. I can walk, Audrey said quickly. She needed to prove she was functional, useful. She stepped out, the jacket slipping off her shoulders. Gabriel caught it and placed it back gently. They moved through a private entrance, bypassing the lobby, straight to the penthouse suite. The elevator ride was a blur of gold buttons and mirrored walls. Audrey caught her reflection, a pale, gaunt ghost with tangled brown hair and large, frightened eyes standing next to a god of war. She looked away, ashamed. The penthouse was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. But Audrey didn't care about the view. She cared about the man in the white coat standing by the sofa. Dr. Eris, Gabriel greeted him. Thank you for coming so late. For you, Your Majesty, any time. The doctor was an older man, a wolf with kind eyes. He looked at Audrey, and his professional mask tightened. He smelled the neglect immediately. Miss Penelope, Dr. Eris said softly. I'm going to need to do a checkup, just to make sure you're okay. Is that all right? Audrey looked at Gabriel. He gave her a small nod. He is safe. He is my personal physician. Okay, Audrey whispered. The examination was humiliating, but quick. Doctor, Eris checked her pulse, listened to her lungs, and gently examined her spine and limbs. He took a small blood sample. Gabriel stood by the window, his back turned to give her privacy, but Audrey could see his reflection in the glass. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He was listening to every heartbeat, every hitch in her breath. Well? Gabriel asked when the doctor stepped back. Dr. Eris sighed, packing his stethoscope away. Malnutrition, severe. Vitamin D deficiency from lack of sunlight. Anemia. Old fractures in the left radius and 2 ribs that healed poorly untreated. A growl rumbled in Gabriel's chest, vibrating against the window pane. And... Dr. Eris paused, looking at Audrey with a furrowed brow. There is something else. Audrey, have you ever felt heat? A fever that comes and goes? Maybe around your 16th birthday? Audrey nodded slowly. Yes, I thought I was dying. It lasted for a week. Richard, he put me in the ice bath. He said I was burning up from infection. Dr. Eris looked at Gabriel. The look they shared was heavy with meaning. That wasn't an infection, Dr. Eris said grimly. That was your first shift trying to happen. But I didn't shift, Audrey said. Because you were suppressed, Dr. Eris said, his voice hard. I found injection marks on your arm, old scarring. Someone was giving you wolfsbane concentrate. Small doses, just enough to poison the wolf spirit, to keep it from manifesting, but not enough to kill the human host. The room spun. Audrey grabbed the arm of the sofa. Poisoned? You aren't dormant, Audrey, Gabriel said, turning around. His face was a mask of cold fury, but his eyes were filled with a sorrow so deep it stole the air from the room. You were suppressed. Richard didn't hide you because you were weak. He hid you because he stole your birthright. My birthright? Gabriel walked over and knelt before her again, taking her cold hands in his. Your father wasn't just a beta, Audrey. I looked at the archives on the way here. Your father was next in line for the alpha position. Richard was his cousin. When your parents died, the title should have passed to you, or held in trust until you found a mate. The pieces slammed together in Audrey's mind. The cruelty, the isolation, the way Richard looked at her not with disgust, but with fear. He made me a ghost, she whispered, tears finally spilling over, so he could be king of his little hill. He stole your life, Gabriel said, thumbing a tear from her cheek. He stole your wolf. He tried to steal your soul. Gabriel stood up, the power in the room spiking until the lights flickered. Dr. Eris, get her on an IV drip. Nutrients, fluids. Start the detox protocol for the wolfsbane immediately. It will be painful, the doctor warned. Waking a wolf that has been drugged for 6 years. It will be violent. I will be here, Gabriel vowed. He looked down at Audrey. I'm not going anywhere. Tonight. You rest. You heal. He walked to the door, where Thomas was waiting. Thomas, Gabriel said, his voice low but carrying the finality of a death sentence. Yes, Alpha? Prepare the war room, and get me the council on the line. Gabriel looked back at Audrey, who was curling up on the sofa. Finally safe, finally seen. I'm going to burn Richard Blackwood's world down, Gabriel said. And I want Audrey to have a front row seat when the ashes settle. The penthouse suite, once a symbol of sterile luxury, had transformed into a high-stakes trauma unit. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight against the dawn, plunging the room into a twilight gloom illuminated only by the rhythmic flash of medical monitors and the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Audrey lay in the center of the king-sized bed, lost in the sheets. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been shattered and glued back together wrong. Her temperature is spiking again, Dr. Eris murmured, checking the display. 104. The wolfsbane is fighting to stay in her system. It's been part of her biology for 6 years. Her body thinks it needs the poison to survive. Gabriel stood on the other side of the bed, a statue carved from granite and grief. He had discarded his dress shirt hours ago. His chest was bare, slick with a thin sheen of sweat, his muscles taut with the effort of holding back his own beast. The scent of distress coming off Audrey was driving his wolf insane. It wanted to hunt. It wanted to kill Richard Blackwood, but the human side knew that violence wouldn't lower her fever. She's in pain, Gabriel rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. The nerves are reawakening, doctor, Eris explained gently, adjusting the flow of the IV. Imagine your foot falling asleep, that pins and needles sensation. Now imagine that across your entire nervous system, magnified by 1,000, her wolf is trying to stretch its limbs for the first time since she was 16. On the bed, Audrey whimpered. It was a high, thin sound that sliced straight through Gabriel's heart. Her back arched off the mattress, her fingers clawing at the sheets. Make it stop, she gasped, her eyes flying open. They were unseeing, glazed with fever. Please, Alpha Richard. I'll be quiet. I promise I'll be quiet. Gabriel flinched as if struck. He leaned over, careful not to let his weight pin her down, but close enough to encompass her. Audrey, he said, pitching his voice low, trying to cut through the hallucination. Richard isn't here. You aren't in the cellar. You're with me. Gabriel. He's coming, she sobbed, thrashing her head from side to side. I hear his boots. He's going to lock the door. It's so cold. Don't let him put me in the dark again. Never, Gabriel growled, the word vibrating in the air. He will never touch you again. He looked at the doctor. Can't you give her a sedative? I can't risk suppressing her respiratory system while the wolf is emerging, Dr. Eris said, looking exhausted. She has to fight this, Gabriel. She has to win the battle for her own body. If we numb her now, the wolf might go back to sleep forever. She needs an anchor. Gabriel nodded. He understood. He climbed onto the bed, sitting behind her, and pulled her trembling body against his chest. He didn't care about the sweat, the vomit bucket by the bed, or the blood from where she had bitten her lip. He wrapped his arms around her, locking his hands over her stomach, pressing his skin against her fever-hot back. Focus on me, he commanded softly into her ear. He pushed his own aura, his alpha power, usually used to dominate outward, wrapping it around her like a heavy, protective blanket. Feel my heartbeat. Match it. Audrey struggled at first, her body jerking with spasms. But Gabriel was immovable. He was a mountain. Breathe, Audrey. In. Out. Slowly, the heat radiating from her began to change. It shifted from the sickly, dry heat of infection to a roaring, furnace-like intensity. Snap. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Audrey screamed, a raw, guttural sound that wasn't entirely human. Her radius, Dr. Eris said, moving quickly to check her arm. It's re-breaking. The old fracture healed crooked. The wolf is fixing it. It's resetting the bone to perfect alignment. Gabriel held her tighter as she convulsed. He could feel the bones shifting under her skin. It was gruesome, but it was a miracle. It meant she was healing. I've got you, Gabriel chanted, rocking her slightly. Let it break. Let it heal. I'm right here. For hours, the cycle repeated. Old scars stretched and faded. Muscles that had atrophied from malnutrition began to knit together with supernatural speed, fueled by the nutrient IVs. It was a biological exorcism. Around 4 a.m., the thrashing stopped. Audrey went limp against him. Her breathing, which had been shallow and ragged, deepened. It became rhythmic, powerful. Gabriel didn't move. He kept his chin resting on the top of her head, smelling the change in her scent. The underlying rot of the cellar was gone. The chemical tang of wolfsbane was fading. Now, she smelled like rain on hot asphalt, like rosemary. And something else, something new. Wintergreen, sharp and fresh. Is she? Gabriel asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Eris checked the monitors, then let out a long, relieved sigh. Her vitals have stabilized. The fever broke. Her white blood cell count is normalizing. The doctor looked at the king with a weary smile. Congratulations, Your Majesty. You just helped deliver a wolf. Gabriel looked down. Audrey was asleep, deeply and truly asleep for the first time in years. Her skin was no longer gray. It was flushed with pink. She looked different, stronger. She's a fighter, Gabriel whispered, brushing a damp strand of hair off her forehead. She had to be, Aris replied, packing his bag. To survive that dosage for 6 years? Any other wolf would have died. She has a core of steel. That one. Gabriel carefully laid her back down on the pillows, pulling the duvet up to her chin. He felt a phantom ache in his chest where their contact broke. Stay with her, Gabriel ordered the doctor. If she wakes up, call me instantly. I need to handle the rest. Where are you going? Eris asked. Gabriel walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. His eyes were hard, the tenderness of the last few hours replaced by the cold calculation of a king preparing for war. The healing is done, Gabriel said, turning to the door. Now, the execution begins. The war room was the hotel's executive conference suite, connected to the penthouse. It smelled of stale coffee and ozone. When Gabriel walked in, wearing fresh clothes but carrying the exhaustion of the night in the dark circles under his eyes, the room snapped to attention. Thomas, his beta, was standing at the head of a long mahogany table covered in tablets, printed schematics, and legal documents. 2 of the pack's top enforcers, Marcus and Silas, stood by the door. A forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Joyce, was typing furiously on a laptop. Report, Gabriel said, dropping into the chair at the head of the table. He didn't ask for coffee. He ran on rage. We have the estate on lockdown, Thomas began, swiping a map onto the main projection screen. Richard is confined to his quarters. He's claiming diplomatic immunity, saying this is an internal pack matter and the king has no jurisdiction to interfere with family medical issues. He lost his jurisdiction when he poisoned a member of the Alpha bloodline, Gabriel said icily. But we need proof that sticks. If I just tear his head off, the council will whine about due process. I want him destroyed legally before I destroy him physically. We found the apothecary, Joyce said, not looking up from her screen. Small shop in the next town over. The books show recurring purchases of wolfsbane extract. Cash only, but the dates align perfectly with the timeline Dr. Eris gave us. Who signed for it? Gabriel asked. No signature, just a recurring pickup. It's circumstantial, Thomas warned. Richard will claim Audrey bought it herself. He'll say she was suicidal or trying to suppress her own wolf because she was mentally unstable. That's the narrative he's been spinning for a decade. Gabriel slammed his fist onto the table. The wood groaned. He locked her in a cellar. He starved her. He claims it was for her safety. Thomas played devil's advocate calmly. He claims she was violent, that he was protecting the pack. We need a witness, Gabriel said, rubbing his temples. Someone who was inside the house. Someone who saw the cruelty and isn't on Richard's payroll. We might have one. Marcus, the enforcer, spoke up from the door. About an hour ago, the perimeter guards caught someone trying to sneak out of the Blackwood estate. She wasn't running away. She was coming here. Gabriel looked up. Who? The head cook, Mrs. Higgins. Gabriel remembered the woman. The gray hair, the terrified eyes, the way she had wept when he carried Audrey out. Bring her in. 5 minutes later, Mrs. Higgins was sitting in a chair opposite Gabriel. She was still wearing her stained apron. She was trembling, twisting a dish towel in her hands. Mrs. Higgins, Gabriel said. His voice wasn't gentle, but it wasn't threatening. It was the voice of a judge. "You were running to find me?" "Yes, Your Majesty," she whispered. She looked at the floor. I couldn't sleep. I saw you take Audrey. I saw the way you looked at her. You watched her suffer for years," Gabriel said, unable to keep the accusation out of his tone. "You fed her scraps. You let her sleep in the cold." Mrs. Higgins flinched, tears spilling over. "I had to. Richard. He said he'd kill my son. My boy is in the pack guard. Richard said if I gave Audrey extra food, or if I let her out, he'd send my boy on a scouting mission to the Northern Barrens, and he wouldn't come back." The room went silent. This was the leverage Richard used. Fear. "Why come forward now?" Gabriel asked. "Because the Alpha is scared," Mrs. Higgins said, looking up. Her eyes were red, but there was a spark of defiance in them now. "I heard him screaming on the phone to his lawyers. He's shredding documents. He's burning things in the fireplace in his office." She reached into her apron pocket. Her hand shook violently as she pulled out a small leather-bound book. It was old, the cover cracked and worn. "He tried to burn this years ago, Mrs." Higgins said, sliding the book across the mahogany table. "Back when Audrey's parents died. I was the housekeeper then, before I was moved to the kitchen. I fished it out of the trash. I kept it hidden under the floorboards of my pantry." Gabriel reached out and took the book. He opened it. It was a journal. The handwriting was elegant, feminine. Entry, October 14th. 1998. Richard is becoming unstable. He keeps asking about the succession laws. He asked my husband if we had a will. I don't trust him around Audrey. I caught him staring at her while she played in the garden, looking at her like she was an obstacle, not a niece. Gabriel flipped forward. Entry, November 2nd, 1998. The mechanic called. He said someone tampered with the brakes on the Jeep. "We're going to the council tomorrow. We have to report him, if anything happens to us." The entry ended there. Gabriel closed the book. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. The silence was absolute. This wasn't just abuse. This was premeditated regicide. Richard hadn't just seized power. He had murdered his own family to get it, and then tortured the sole witness for 2 decades. "This is it," Thomas whispered, looking at the journal. "This proves premeditation. It proves the parents suspected him, and combined with the medical report. It's enough for the council to strip his title," Joyce confirmed. "It's enough for a death warrant." Gabriel stood up. He walked over to Mrs. Higgins and placed a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but he held firm. "You have done a brave thing, Martha," he said, using her first name. "Your son is safe. My enforcers will secure him within the hour. No one touches him." Mrs. Higgins sobbed with relief. "Thank you, Alpha. Thank you." Gabriel turned to Thomas. "Get the jet ready. We aren't doing this over the phone. I want the High Council convened in person." "And Audrey?" Thomas asked. "She's not fit to travel." "She stays here, under guard. I'm not bringing her before the council until she can stand on her own 2 feet and look them in the eye." Gabriel buttoned his jacket, his movements sharp and lethal. "Richard thinks he is fighting a scandal," Gabriel said, his eyes glowing gold. "He doesn't realize he is fighting a ghost story, and the ghost just woke up." Suddenly, the door to the war room opened. Dr. Aris stood there, looking pale. "Your Majesty," the doctor said urgently. "You need to come. Now." Gabriel's heart stopped. "Is she crashing?" "No," Aris said, stepping aside. "She's awake, and she's asking for a mirror." Gabriel rushed past the doctor, abandoning the war room. The politics could wait. The strategy could wait. He needed to see her. He needed to see the woman who had survived the dark. The bedroom was silent, save for the hum of the city outside the penthouse windows. When Gabriel stepped through the door, he expected to find Audrey back in bed, weak and trembling. He expected tears. He expected the fragile, broken bird he had carried out of the cellar. Instead, he found a queen. Audrey was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror on the far wall. She was still wearing the oversized white cotton shirt Dr. Aris had given her, which hung off her thin frame like a shroud. She was leaning heavily on the IV stand, her knuckles white as she gripped the metal pole for support. Her legs were shaking, threatening to buckle with every heartbeat, but she was standing. Gabriel stopped in the doorway, his breath catching in his throat. He didn't rush to help her. His instincts told him that to intervene now would be an insult. This was a battle she had to fight alone. Audrey stared at the stranger in the glass. The grime of the coal cellar was gone. Her skin, scrubbed raw by the nurses, was pale but luminous, glowing with the accelerated healing of her awakened wolf. Her hair, once a matted tangle of grease and dust, had been washed and brushed into soft chestnut waves that fell past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that held her captive. They were no longer the muddy, terrified hazel of the girl in the dark. They were bright, piercing amber, the color of whiskey held up to the sunlight. They were the eyes of a predator. "I don't know her," Audrey whispered. Her voice was raspy, unused to speaking at a normal volume, but it didn't waver. Gabriel took a step forward, the thick carpet muffling his footsteps. "She has been waiting for you for a long time." Audrey lifted a hand, tracing the line of her own jaw in the reflection. She touched the faint, silver scar on her cheekbone, a souvenir from a ring Richard wore when he backhanded her for dropping a plate 3 years ago. "He said I was ugly," she murmured, her eyes narrowing slightly. "He said I was a genetic dead end, a mistake that nature tried to erase." "He lied," Gabriel said, his voice low and vibrating with a suppressed growl. He moved to stand behind her, his dark reflection towering over hers. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a physical weight, a shield of heat and power at her back. "Richard Blackwood is a small man who fears big things. And you, Audrey, you are the biggest thing that has ever happened to his pack." Audrey looked at Gabriel in the mirror. She saw the way he looked at her not with pity, but with reverence. She saw the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf on the continent, standing guard behind a girl who had spent her life eating scraps. "The girl in the cellar," Audrey said, her voice trembling. "She wants to hide. She wants to crawl under the covers and never come out." "And the wolf?" Gabriel asked softly. "What does she want?" Audrey closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the room lemon polish, rain, cedar, and Gabriel. Deep inside her chest, something uncurled. It wasn't the terrified flutter of a victim. It was a cold, heavy coil of iron. It was the memory of every cold night, every hunger pang. Every time she had watched Richard laugh while she froze, her eyes snapped open. The amber burned brighter, almost gold. "She wants to go home," Audrey said. Gabriel frowned, confused. "Home? Audrey, you never have to go back to that house. I have estates in the north, in the city." "No," Audrey cut him off. She turned around slowly, letting go of the IV stand. She wobbled, but she didn't fall. She locked eyes with him, and for the first time, Gabriel felt the true weight of her lineage. This wasn't just a mate bond. This was the daughter of an alpha. "That house is mine," she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. "My father built the east wing. My mother planted the rose garden he let die. Richard stole it. He stole my life. He stole my name." She took a step toward Gabriel. She was a foot shorter than him, barefoot and frail, yet she seemed to fill the room. "I am not going to run away to your castle, Gabriel," she declared. "I am going to walk back into Blackwood Manor. I am going to walk through the front door, and I am going to watch him realize that he didn't bury a mistake. He planted a seed." A slow, feral smile spread across Gabriel's face. It was a terrifying expression, one that promised violence, but his eyes shone with absolute pride. "Then we will need to get you a dress," Gabriel said, bowing his head slightly, a gesture of submission to her resolve. "Because if you are going to take back your kingdom, my love, you should be dressed for a coronation." Audrey looked back at the mirror one last time. The ghost was gone. "Not a coronation," she corrected him, her amber eyes flashing. "An execution." She reached out and took Gabriel's hand. The bond between them flared hot and bright, sealing their pact. "Call the council," Audrey ordered, her voice ringing with the authority of a queen returned from the dead. "Tell them the Blackwood heir is coming home for dinner." And that is where we leave Audrey and King Gabriel. For now, Audrey has risen from the ashes of the cellar, not as a victim, but as an avenging angel with the Alpha King at her side. She's ready to walk back into the lion's den, and this time, she has the teeth to bite back. The board is set, the evidence is in hand, and Richard has no idea that the ghost he tried to erase is about to knock on his front door. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel and tells me you want to see the final showdown. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell right now, because you do not want to miss the next video. We're going to cover the council meeting, Richard's trial, and the moment Audrey finally takes her rightful place as Alpha. What do you think? Should Audrey show mercy to the pack members who ignored her suffering, or should she exile them all? Let me know your theory in the comments below. I'll be pinning the best one. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next chapter.